here today speaking to you, and I hope that you can all pay some attention while you're eating your breakfast, although I know it was a little bit hard for me to tear my eyes off my oatmeal. And I hope that this will be a very enjoyable session, as this whole conference has been very enjoyable, I'm sure, as well as educational for you. So my mom was saying that I need to make some jokes to wake everybody up, but you look pretty alert, so I think I'm going to save myself from the terror of you don't want to see me making jokes purposely. It's not pretty. Okay, so I wanted to start with, there is something though that might make you sit up in your seats a little bit, and it's this newspaper clipping that you'll notice over here. It's from the Ufield Herald, and teachers at Paul J. Sorkin Junior High School says in Ufield, Iowa, were surprised early this Monday by an educational change of pace instigated by the Ufield County school system. Instead of students filing into classes to hear the teachers lecture at the head of the class, teachers found themselves being herded in the classrooms where young people lectured and assigned homework to the dumbfounded grown-ups. Students infiltrated the PA system, coached the day's sports, and managed all extracurricular activities. It was a surreal experience, said one teacher when asked to describe her day. So I will be asking you some questions about that newspaper clipping later. But for now, I know that sounds incredibly strange, this newspaper clipping about students teaching teachers and assigning them homework and herding them into the classroom. But students teaching teachers may not actually be such an incredibly isolated occurrence. Take a look at this will advance. Oh dear. Okay. I was going to say take a look at these two videos of me teaching teachers, and it doesn't look like the video's loaded, but it's okay. And every day, basically, I have a video conferencing studio in my home's basement, and I use it to do a lot of lessons. I teach other kids as well as talking to adults about professional development, specifically technology, which of course always fails whenever I'm trying to influence parents. But I really love talking to teachers, and they're always very open and receptive to not only what they can learn about technology, but also what they can learn about kids, learn from kids. And so had you been able to see these videos, you would have seen me teaching over on the side, and in that case, my students were teachers. Now some of you, and you probably know who you are, might be thinking along the lines of, well, students teaching adults, that it's sort of weird, that's not right with the universe, and it's kind of messing up things' natural order. But my way of thinking is that just as it's always a good idea to hear two sides of an issue, it's also a good idea to step into someone else's shoes. Just as I don't think that we can always truly understand an issue until we see both sides of it, I think that it can be extremely beneficial when it comes to teaching and learning to understand how students feel and what students think. The insights we learn will help us form the education systems of the future. So here at this conference, we see, whether walking through the exhibit hall or just going to the sessions, you've seen many innovative uses of technology taking place. And this is already, we've begun forming the education systems of the future and making it easier for students and parents to be able to access learning and how they're doing as far as progress. You know, it's a very powerful step already with technology. So you've seen how it can work wonders in education. But there's still more that we can do. It's a widely held belief that education has catching up to do when it comes to technology and change. You may have heard people say, oh, you know, our schools are behind, or our schools need to catch up, or things like that. And it's not just education either. I know that society has a way of belittling the whole over 40 age group when it comes to technology. When someone I know who didn't want to be named, she heard about seniors getting on Facebook, more specifically Queen Elizabeth II getting a Facebook page. This was after this was announced. She said these memorable words: "Old people on Facebook, that's just wrong." This anonymous source, thankfully, is not here with us today, otherwise she would be very mad at me because she is actually at school and I'm going to say no more. Maybe it's less about ability and more about circumstance. For many of you, you probably didn't have the luck, or either way you look at it, you probably didn't grow up in a world where we tweet and blog and social network online. And now when I'm giving this presentation or talking to teachers about technology, then a lot of the feedback I hear is, well, you know, adults, not all adults are bad at technology, and not every single adult is bad at everything. And I think that that's very true, and especially with you guys in the audience, and I want to make it clear, you guys in the audience, you, I'm pretty sure, work with technology firsthand, or at least many of you do. You probably oversee things, you keep your school together in many ways, I'm sure, working with technology. And at the same time, though, I'm guessing that maybe at least once or twice in your lifetime, you may have had the experience of asking your 3-year-old daughter what app to download on your iPad or how to troubleshoot. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit with a 3-year-old, but it's possible. So put on your student hat virtually and imagine that you're someone my age. In my 13 years, I've seen the switch from VCRs and videotapes to TiVos and DVDs. My generation has grown up with cell phones, internet, email, calculators. During the protests in Iran against the Ahmadinejad regime, and more recently during the protests in Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, the nightly news channels were really often getting their news from Twitter and video from cell phones. The eyewitness reports, if you will, of the 21st century. Like yesterday's students, today's students have many different career options ahead of them, or ahead of us, but the kinds of career options we have ahead are a little bit different. As you may know, farmers have become city dwellers quite increasingly over the last few hundreds of years, and the world has gone through periods of rapid change in recent history. So professions have been adding up steadily as well and changing. Who worked as a school media specialist or technology coordinator 100 years ago. And I read an article on MSN where someone quoted was a menu psychologist, which sounds like a pretty sweet job to me, and they also mentioned forensic accounting, which I had not heard of previously. And what little boy or girl used to tell their parents, you know, Mom, Dad, when I grow up, I want to work in the area of green funeral directing. Actually, I'm not sure that that scenario takes place a whole lot now either, but it's possible. With the revolution of technology over the past 30 years, then a lot of job professions which might have been very normal have not become quite so normal. Whoever hears of a chandler anymore. And job titles which were not in existence a few years ago have become commonplace, as you just saw. It's no longer so much about choosing one path and staying on it for the rest of our life, because the 21st century student's direction is forked in so many different directions. In fact, the US Department of Labor estimates that today's learner will have 10 to 14 jobs by the age of 38. In the olden days, you might graduate from high school or college, get a job, and stay with it for the rest of your life, and maybe your kids and grandkids would even do the same line of work as well. But today, as you all know, with the 10 to 14 jobs, that's probably, those jobs might not even all be in the same area. And because of this more competitive and more volatile economy, then students might not be able to do the same jobs that their parents and grandparents have done, and they might not even be able to stick with it long enough for their kids. So what does all this information mean for 21st century students, and what does it mean for 21st century schools? In order to best shape paths for the 21st century student, we have to understand what sets old student pathways and new student pathways apart. A tale of two paths, if you will, my kind of pithy allusion there. You might wonder, why can't we continue to pave the same paths as we've always done? And you could bring up all the great thinkers and artists and even presidents of the past to say, you know, this is what our education approach from the 1800s, it's been excellent as far as a track record. You sit in a room, you listen to your teacher relate the facts of the world, you go home, and you come back the next day, listen to more facts. You know, why not hold on to a good road if that seems to have been working? But the thing is, in a changed and exponentially changing world, that same approach may not work for everybody. In an age of global connections, today's students are diverse in their backgrounds, culture, ethnicity, skill level, and how they learn. Some students may learn best watching videos or doing a project online. Some students may learn best by reading out of the textbook and then writing an essay. Some students may learn best by creating an audio track to complement the lesson material. The 21st century has brought innovations in technology, science, transportation, how we get our information. So when it comes to education, learning, and teaching, maybe it's time for schools to catch up with us in the 21st century. Being on both sides of the classroom means using some of the tools that matter to us. We know that we can create this innovative classroom with the help of technology, as many of you are already doing. But when it comes to technology, a few of you might be asking, well, who's going to help us? Raise your hand if you've ever had issues with a piece of technological equipment in school or out. I think probably most unanimously raised hands unless you only just started using anything. I could be wrong, but I think I see a bit of a trend here. I mean, already during the course of this session, then you've already seen 2 videos malfunction, not loading properly. And as I said in my introduction, our world has been technology-filled pretty much since we were born, and it's a commonly accepted reality that, okay, sometimes your 14-year-old daughter might be a little more skilled at her iPod Touch than you are with your smartphone or your iPod. But and it might make some people uncomfortable or scared that their kids or their grandkids even might know more about technology than they do. But if you find yourself in this position, it's really okay as long as you're open-minded about learning and catching up. And as I said again, you may be the go-to person in your school when it comes to technology. You may be the person with the most expertise, and yet you might have had those moments where you're asking your kids, how do I download this app, or what game should I download? As a case in point of this open-minded kind of attitude, this is my dad. This is my dad, John Sweetuck. He's actually sitting here, so you don't have to rely on the windy Mexico picture over there. And you can stand up if he wants. Okay. Now, I'm not just making him stand up because I want to give my family members exposure, although I'm sure they would appreciate that. But rather because my dad's been interested in Facebook for some time now. And finally, last October, he actually set up an account, which was a pretty big step because he was pretty much just bashing everybody who uses Facebook before that. No, not. It was more Twitter. But what's so nice about my dad being on Facebook is that it's given my sister and I the chance to finally be able to answer some of his questions as opposed to asking him questions like, what's the deal with ionic and covalent bonds again, or how do I solve this inequality? So it's an empowering feeling, and some of you may have had this with people who you really look up to and who teach you a lot, but it's sometimes a little bit, you want to be able to teach them something. And they say that an old dog can't learn new tricks, which is not true. I think they actually disproved that in a study, by the way. But my dad is a very quick learner when it comes to Facebook, and it's not just restricted to Facebook, because my sister and I, we've been doing quite a lot. I also set up a blog for him, johnfsweettalk.blogspot.com, showed him the basics of an interactive whiteboard, and the only thing my mom may be a little less happy about, got him hooked on the addictive game app on the pretty much everything, Angry Birds. So, with the possible exception of Angry Birds, my dad using technology a lot and being online might actually equal more in-person conversation because we're talking, asking and answering questions and explaining things. And even Angry Birds, what's the best way to get this projectile over to the fort of pigs? If you have never played Angry Birds, you know what I'm talking about. It's enough said. So I highly encourage you to do the same. I know this sounds like a sort of strange approach, but you may have already done a lot of this at home, maybe asking your kids, what exactly is Facebook, or what exactly is Twitter, how do I use it, or FormSpring, or whatever it is that's the newest tool that kids are using. And I highly encourage you to do this not only at home, but also at school. By asking students, what's new, what kinds of technologies are being used, what's the hottest new website, where do you go to post information. But to put my teacher hat back on, when you hear things like social networking, Facebook, Twitter, and you might think of LOLing, OMGing, and taking Are You a Cookie quizzes on Facebook, which is actually true. It actually consists, I think, of 2 questions. Do you contain sugar, and do you contain chocolate chip? Oh, it goes into deep analysis, I'm sure. And you might think, with all this shallow communication, seemingly, that it's not really a good idea to give kids a lot of access to technology, that there's just too much potential for shallow communication. And honestly, one thing that I worry about is that while social networking allows us to reach out on a wider scale to pretty much anyone in the world, are we really going deeper? Maybe we're just sort of spreading it out more and not really going deep. Because back when communication took months and months to travel by mail, then of course you had a vested interest because of all the postage money you spent in writing your thoughts very well and putting a lot of thought into your letter. So you might be a little skeptical of technology's ability to help education, seeing all this shallow communication. Maybe you've even seen evidence to the contrary. Raise your hand if you've ever seen a son or daughter distracted by texting or their cell phone or social media. Okay, I see some raised hands. What about students? I've probably seen some students doing that as well. And I would argue that just as I've seen kids who are distracted by internet gaming and networking, I know my sister sometimes chats on Facebook when really she ought to be doing her math. I've also seen kids, and sometimes the same kids, who use the internet to post meaningful work and help others. We often hear about adults searching for the meaning of life and for purpose, but a lot of people neglect the fact that kids want purpose and meaning in what they do as well. I ran a conference in September called TEDx Redmond, and TEDx events are these independently organized events. TED is a prestigious conference, and TEDx Redmond was unique in that it was organized entirely by kids and attended entirely by kids. We actually sent the parents off to a simulcast room, and so it was just a whole lot of kids in this room, and all these speakers who were all 16 or under. And you might think, wow, a lot of speakers 16 or under, this sounds like a zoo, but it was actually a really professional, really fun and educational conference. It was a kid's eye view on everything from education to the environment. In the education section, we heard from Zoe Sprankle about the issue of impact, effect, and purpose. And what she said, and you'll be watching in a minute, was she talked about her experiences in class and the issue of impact, effect, and purpose within education. So it may or may not load. If it doesn't load, I have the video actually, so I'll just find that. Always a good idea to not show things live off YouTube when the internet connection is not always super sure. Okay, here we go. Oh, wow, okay. No, actually that might be